I had hoped to fish Pevensey Bay during early spring, but restrictions prevented me from doing so the earliest I could get there was mid-May. There are plenty of marks worth fishing all the way from White Horses to Norman's Bay. Here I've decided to give the beach in front of Martello Court a try. Conditions looked perfect for plaice, with clear skies and water, and with a gentle breeze from behind. I've set up my stall for catching plaice, but since this is a new mark for me, I didn't really know what to expect. Clip down rigs fished at distance is normally the way to go for plaice, so one of my rods has got a 3-hook short snood clip down rig, while the other one's got a 2-hook long snood loop rig for searching the ground more. The 3-hook rig is attached to a pyramid lead which digs in, while the loop rig has a long stem Takana bomb which rolls about a bit more. Depending on circumstances, I may have to change these leads. If I find there's too much tidal pull, I might have to go for ones with wires. There is usually some point in the tide when it runs a little bit more, and a change is sometimes likely. I might also have to change the rigs over if I find that one is outperforming the other, or if I feel that there's a need to be using something like a boom rig. Boom rigs work well if bites a very difficult spot, and the average size of the plaice is quite small. It's by no means hot, but with the sun being out, I need to change the water that lugworm's in. That has heated up a little bit, and so I do need to put some fresh stuff in. Unless you're wearing waders, it is quite handy to have a bucket with a rope attached for this purpose. While I'm refreshing my lugworm, I'll quickly run through the locational details. Pevensey Bay is midway between Eastbourne and Bexhill. Southern Harbour is to the southwest and Norman's Bay to the northeast. This map shows some of the better known marks in the area. It then points out where Martello Court is in relation to them. It's closer to the Grey Tower than the main car park at Shoal Road. Martello Court is a residential area, so named because it's built around the Martello Tower, and it's adjacent to Pevensey Bay Leisure Park. You access it from the A259 by either turning down Timber Lane Road or Granville Road. I'm fishing a bay between groins directly in front of it. With the rods out and lugworms refreshed, I'm eagerly awaiting my first bite. Since I'm fishing for flatfish, my 15-foot continental rods are set low, but I'm still pernickety about the position of the tripod. These are Gravel Technos Deweys, but I still like them despite having upgraded to top of the range Colmic rods. So these are the rigs that I've already mentioned. You may have noticed I've already changed the lead over on the loop rig to a star lead to get more grip, and the beads are 8mm red and yellow as opposed to black and green. There is a debate as to which is better for plaice. As I position my rod on my tripod, I need to avoid the line getting wrapped around it, otherwise it will break when I strike. Although it doesn't look it, there is a bit of a wind blowing offshore, so apologies for the crackling sound. My rod tips haven't moved yet, so I twitch and drag my rigs to create a little bit of interest. This is particularly useful when the water's clear, because dragging your lead stirs up the bottom a little bit. A little puff of silt or sand can be spotted by the fish, and I suppose if the water's coloured, then the movement creates a few vibrations which can be picked up. Sometimes if I get a little twitch, I hold a rod, waiting for a little knock to strike into. Often these little knocks never develop into a good pull round, so are sometimes worth hitting. I get a lot of flatfish doing this, but I know some anglers will just wait, hoping that the fish will just hook themselves. More times than not, that happens when you're fishing with long snoods, and you never see the bites anyway. But fishing braid rather than mono, you get a much better chance of seeing them. That little twitch developed into a slow but steady pull, and I can feel a bit of a weight on, and I know what it's likely to be. And yes, that is what I was fearing. Not a fish, but a spider crab. These could be present in plague proportions from late April and going all the way through to the end of July. These are edible, but I know that there are some restrictions regarding harvesting them. Not that I'd particularly want to do that. And these are another good reason for dragging your baits. If you feel that you've got one of those sitting on top of your rig, then by putting it away from it obviously helps. However, if you use long snoods, like those that I've got on my loop rig, sometimes you don't even know that they're there. They can even snip off your hook length without you realising it, and that happened several times today. So, having lost the top hook of my loop rig, I've decided that I'm going to shorten my snoods quite considerably. This can't be done if you use crimps to secure your snoods, but if you only use stop knots on the top snood, then it's easily achievable. On all of my loop rigs, I secure the bottom snood with crimps, but the top snood is always secured by using stop knots. I like to have the flexibility of being able to modify these rigs whilst fishing. So I've just shortened the top snood and cut off the surplus body line of this rig. Sometimes, even if you bring back all of your hooks, spider crabs can still damage the line just above your hook. So when they're about, you do need to check your line, because you might have to make changes. Here I'm using size 2 Aberdeen hooks. I've cut off the damaged part of the line, and I'm using a uni knot to tie the hook. On loop rigs, it doesn't really matter if your top snood is of different length than the bottom one, but here I'm checking to see what sort of fit there is, and then I'm going to adjust the bottom snood as well. I'll cut this off at the swivel and shorten it that way. The bottom hook is clipped up on a breakaway imp. I can then see how far I need to move up or down the top snood so it clips up on the bottom one properly. If anyone's interested in how I make up my loop rigs from scratch, then I will place a link above to a video which covers this and one in the description below, but you might have to wait for that because I'd like to have all of my rig making videos within the context of actually using them and catching fish on them. Anyway, back to the fishing, or rather lack of it. I did give this session my best shot, but I didn't stick around for too much longer. Having caught 8 of these spider crabs and having lost about a dozen hooks, I thought it was time to move on somewhere else. Spider crabs put me off coming back here in the summer, but I did venture back in October. Conditions were perfect, being overcast and with next to no wind. However, I was a little bit concerned about the colour in the water. I didn't think that was right for plaice. I know that they had been coming out at Southern Park in Eastbourne, so I was still hopeful of maybe getting 1 or 2 here. This time I'll be starting with 2 3-hook short snood clip down rigs and having a loop rig in standby. But loop rig doesn't have any bees this time. One of the 3-hook rigs is attached to a Takana bomb which will roll, but the other one and the loop rig are attached to breakaway continental impact leads. These are a type pyramid lead and I really like using them. They fly in the air very well and they grip the bottom quite nicely. I've arrived a couple of hours after the tide's already started to flood, and I've made the same mistake as I've done several times fishing Pevensey Bay, is I've set up too close to the water's edge, so a move would be imminent. To make sure that I can spot tiny knocks, I need to ensure that my line is straight to the lead, so I'm winding in any slack that's there, having cast out. Periodically tightening up to lead and dragging my rigs is a common feature of my fishing. On the face of it, using rods with sensitive tips is obviously of a benefit to spotting tiny little knocks. However, if you're using braid, that's not quite as important. So here goes my first move up the beach. The rods would be the last to be moved, in the hope that something might take my bait when I'm not looking. Well, that hasn't worked so far, so my next ploy is to just bring in one of those rods and rebait it and get it ready for recasting, but leaving the other one down there up till the last minute. Since I haven't seen any indications of a bite yet, I'll leave that rig out there for a bit longer. So I'm lifting the bail arm of my reel and letting line out as I move my rod and the tripod up the beach. So by setting up too close to the water's edge to begin with, I am wasting a little bit of time. But having said that, I would have had to move up the beach in any case. And I've already got this rod ready to be cast out, so no harm done there. However, it would have been nice to have caught something by now, but to be honest, I'm thinking that it's more likely to happen closer to high tide. That's more like it. Looks like it was worth leaving that rig out for a little bit longer. I wouldn't have been able to do that in May, but in October those spider crabs aren't about. But unfortunately, what is about is whiting. At least it gets me off the mark. For me, when fishing at distance, clipping down and a finger stall is a must. Enough for whiting, but at least the bites are coming now. Although I'm not complaining, this looks like it's going to turn out to be a whiting fest. Sometimes you just have to fish through them to try and get something different. When there's lots of those whiting about, sometimes you don't know which rod to strike first. Or whether to strike at both of them. Anyway, on this occasion, that proved to be a disaster, since I've got my lines tangled up. There's fish on both rigs, but this rig got wrapped around the braid of my other rod. I'm happy with this triple shot, but not when it's got tangled up around my other line. This will take some undoing. Anyway, there were 2 fish on the other rig, but I had to cut the line and retie the shock leader, so all time wasted. That's one of the dangers of fishing with 2 rods, particularly if you're not using grip leads. If you're allowing one of your rigs to roll, you've got to make sure that's the first one you cast out, and make sure you're casting downdrift as well. I allowed those rigs to get too close together, and a tangle was inevitable when I was pulling one of them in. You really don't want that happening if you've got a decent fish on. Having removed the rig to retie the shock leader, I'm now swapping over to the loop rig. This rig will offer a different form of presentation, and if there's no plaice around, it's a very good one for bass. It's now the top of the tide, and the lifeboat service is out. I think it was a false alarm, since after the boat left, a bit of driftwood floated by. I got a feeling that someone mistook that for someone in trouble. It went a bit quiet, which is often the case right at the top of the tide, but as it started to ebb, bites followed in quick succession. The tidal pull has also increased to the point that I need to use grip leads, so I swapped over to using a 6-ounce breakaway with wires. Another angler has now turned up to fish the bay next to me, and we had a bit of a discussion. Whilst talking, a few fish topped quite close in, so I did at some point swap over to using feathers, thinking they might be mackerel. Nothing came of that, so I gave up on the idea. The other angler thought they might be garfish, so I really wish I'd set up a float rod instead. The tide is ebbing properly now, so it's time for my one and only move back down the shingle. I'm still hopeful for something other than a whiting, so I'm going to stick it out for another couple of hours. Same routine as with moving up the shingle. I'll wind in one rod, swap the baits over, and prepare it for casting, then go and grab the other one. Lugworm on the bottom two snods and ragworm on the top. Which bait I've used today hasn't made any difference, since the whiting have gone for both. still getting fish at this state of the tide. In fact, I'm getting more than on the flood. But they are still only whiting, and my hopes of getting a plaice, or anything else for that matter, are quickly fading. Is this something different? It feels different. No, it's not anything different, but whiting number 26. That brings me up to 28, so I make the decision that I'll stop at 30, even though I'm still getting a bite to chuck. Still only a whiting, but I'm ever hopeful. Light has started to fade. There is a possibility of a sole, but that would be really pushing my luck. No, not a sole, and it is whiting number 30, so it is time to call it a day. A busy session, but it's only whiting, so it's back to the drawing board.